Hello, everybody. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session. Thank you for taking the time to be here today. Today, we are presenting Many Locations, One Community, Women in Tech at the University of California with Allison Flick, Annelie Rugg, and Yvonne Tevis. These three women recently authored an education review article that reflects on how they built community across the UC system by starting their UC Women in Technology Committee. It's now gained traction and it's getting results. They're going to share insights about the model that has worked for them and how others may be able to follow at their own campuses or in their own systems. My name is Lori Burris, and I'm the Education Innovation Advisor at LinkedIn Learning, the leading provider of online videos, and I'll be moderating the panel. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. Don't worry, we'll be sending out an on-demand recording of this webinar as soon as it's available. Any presentation decks or additional materials will also be sent to you. If you have questions during the presentation, please type them into the Q&A box in your Zoom control panel. We'll bring them up during the presentation if they're hot topics, and we will also have time for questions at the end. We encourage social sharing with your audience members. You can always use hashtag #HEDLeaders. For those of you joining us for the first time, welcome, and know that we love hearing from you. Today, the format is a conversation. It's a dialogue with our three panelists, followed by questions from you. Now, without further ado, let's hear from Allison, Annelie, and Yvonne. And will you each take a moment to briefly share a little bit about who you are, your professional journey, and your role in the Women in Tech model at the University of California? Allison, let's start with you.
Hi, my name is Allison Flick. I am the IT Service Operations Manager at University of California, San Diego Library. I have about 2 decades of experience in IT within higher education, and I am currently the Vice Chair of the Women in Tech Committee within the entirety of the UC system.
Annelie, what about you?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Annelie Rugg. I work at UCLA as the director of UCLA Humanities Technology, which is like an embedded technology unit in the College of Letters and Sciences on behalf of humanities, faculty, students, and staff. And I've been there the whole time, my whole career in the UC system after completing my PhD in Slavic linguistics. So the tech track from linguistics, I'm happy to speak with anyone who's interested in learning about that one. And I was the original chair of the UC Women in Technology Committee, the founding chair, and very privileged to have that role, and very excited to talk with you more about what we've done today.
And Yvonne, we'll have you be the caboose.
Well, good morning. I'm Yvonne Tevis. I am Chief of Staff in the IT department at the University of California Office of the President, which is what we call our system-wide headquarters. And a lot of my role is actually around communications and community building. I'm one of the co-founders of our UC Women in Tech Committee, but I've also been involved in other university-wide initiatives, including one particularly important to me, which is web accessibility.
Mine too. So Yvonne, I'm going to start with you. Originally, there were several campus-based Women in Tech or WIT groups, but you felt the groups working together could harness scale and power. So you went for the power of a university-wide WIT community with the emphasis on community. How did you get there? And I hope you tell us how big that scope is for the UC system as well.
Yeah, okay. So the idea actually started a few years ago when I was attending a leadership development program. And a primary message that we get through that program is that we need to be intentional about the type of leader we want to be and the change we want to see. And that in fact, as leaders, our job actually is to affect positive change, not just to be happy with the status quo. So while I was in the program, it was the time of the Me Too movement emerging. And a few of us women, were talking at lunch in the program, and we realized that we have the opportunity and responsibility to try to affect some change for women within our own community across the university. So we wanted to create some way to do that. And I certainly in particular wanted to create it with a university scale, because I'd been involved in other system-wide groups and I've seen how powerful it is and how effective you can be when you have people from around the whole organization working together. So in terms of how we got it started, we were just lucky in the sense that at UC, we have a long tradition of having an annual summer conference for our tech staff. And it's a big one. I mean, at the last in-person conference, at least, we had 800 people attend. So our idea was really simple, which was, let's see if we could convene a panel of UC women tech leaders to speak at that conference and just talk honestly about these kind of Me Too issues, what they had faced in their careers as women in IT, what their challenges were, and their advice for other women about how to overcome those challenges. And then we would organize the panel so that there'd be a conversation with the audience. And that was a way that we could then gauge if there was interest, within our community of actually forming a system-wide group, because ultimately that was my ultimate goal. So the panel that we did have at that conference was such a success. And it was so clear from that conversation and just the excitement in the room of women getting together and talking and suddenly realizing that they're not alone. There was obvious tremendous desire to form a system-wide committee. So we proceeded and we called for volunteers to join and we took it from there.
Well, I really love that. And I love the fact that you've made mindfulness part of being a leader, that idea of intentionality. And secondly, I think I would have said this 24 months now, but now that we're looking at the Supreme Court overturning Roe versus Wade, I know women really are looking to their own support through their communities to help them to address all the changes and the issues that face them in having work-life balance and in their careers. So Annelie, Yvonne mentioned being intentional about change. What are some of the other guiding principles of your community, and how did you come up with these guiding principles?
Well, I can start from our article, which I won't assume everyone has read, although I encourage you, if you'd like to follow up after this at some point. There are 3 guiding principles that we mentioned in that article that I think are probably foundational to the group, and that we came up with, I think, organically. It was just very natural. There was immediate consensus around these. One of those is to be intentional about change, that we want to be very thoughtful about what we're doing, purposeful, directed, and so on. So we're not, trying to cover everything all at once. That's impossible. So that's a very important guiding principle. The other 2 that are mentioned in the article, people are stronger when they work together to drive change, right? So already women in technology very often feel very isolated. So coming together is energizing, and then out of that energy, you build strength, and together you can go forward on small and larger changes. And then the third guiding principle that we emphasized out of the gate is that grassroots action has power. And this is very much a grassroots set of issues. We're here to help everyone on the ground who is working wherever they are working in the UC system, in the technology sector. And principally that things don't need to be top down to have impact. And we've seen that with some of the things that we've been able to accomplish. I would add to those 3, since we came up with those initially, some additional ones that I could highlight, which is, one thing is that to get started, just do what you can, however small it is. So that was very empowering, and take it step by step and grow from where you have been, and draw from what you can do, right? Don't try to do something you feel overwhelmed by. Another one is that we want to keep in mind as we work that the desired outcome of our actions is improving support for UC women in technology. So, and for those who are interested in technology. So there's a lot of women out there who are interested in our group who aren't even technology adjacent, but are interested in getting into technology and want to know how to do that. So keeping that in mind is very important. And that goes with the intentionality, right? So we know where we're headed and we want to be intentional about that. A third one is to keep safe space for sharing. So while we are wanting to have impact out there in the world, we also want to provide that space for the community, for the committee, in our meetings and in the events that we hold. for people to connect and to share the realities that they're facing. That's very empowering as well. And related to that, that we want to prioritize that community support alongside doing things and taking action. So there's a balance between the two.
Those are really great points, and they'd be fundamental to many cross-discipline committees on campuses. I was struck by the one that community can actually serve to be a lift up. It's actually going to lift up everybody, because you can come to people when you're facing challenges or when you feel like you've hit a failure. You've got someone that you said in a safe, trusted environment you can go to and bring up the community through that collective experience. The second thing is, and I don't think universities are really taking advantage of this, especially system-wide, it's been very hard in technology to hire people right now. And the fact that this community actually affords women a chance to look at careers that maybe move them sideways, up and downs, crossways, and even jump is really, really important. Because the one thing we know is that the T model doesn't work like it used to. We're all going to have a changing career. We're going to look back and say, I've had 5 different jobs, which none of those job titles I could have known at the time I graduated from college. So I think that's a super important thing, but I don't think universities quite think like that yet. And I think your group is really future forward by doing that. So Allison, your mission states that the UCWIT promotes a supportive, inclusive environment to support the professional goals and aspirations of UC women in technology. What kinds of activities have you sponsored to support this overall mission?
Well, we've done a real wide variety of activities, some very small and focused, others very, very broad that will encompass the whole UC. We've done this in several different environments. We've done print, we've done virtual, and as we mentioned earlier, in person with our UC Tech conference. We've done one of the items that has been really successful and that we do every year for Women's History Month is we produce a Women Rock IT article where each campus can nominate a woman of note who works in IT and have a small profile published about them. And so we'll publish a profile for each campus and health center with a little bit of information about who this individual was, what they contributed to the university, and how that really lifted up their departments and the university through their work in IT. That's been wonderful, and it's been really nice because we've been able to really highlight purposefully maybe some of the folks that don't get as much notoriety, so maybe not our people in the C-suite, but more of our boots on the ground individuals who are always working steadfastly and strongly through the university, who really deserve to have their voices highlighted. Some of the other things we do during the pandemic, we started doing a community collective, which was a space for women to gather and talk about a particular issue and then go into breakout rooms and be in smaller groups to talk about that particular issue. Some of the things that we talked about were during COVID, a lot of responsibility fell on women during COVID to keep their families together, to keep everything running. We did this around the holidays too, where a lot of times women will take on the task of bringing family together for the holidays. And what did that look like when you couldn't get everybody together for the holidays for COVID? And so we would break into small groups where there were maybe 6 or 7 people, enough where there was room for everybody to speak and connect and meet and allow people to voice the issues that are difficult for themselves right now and to hear that. And so because of that, we were able to sort of really connect with the people that we are representing, really hear what's difficult for them, and then also form learning opportunities around that. So we've done several UC Tech talks. We've done a talk on psychological safety and the importance of psychological safety within the workplace. We've done a talk on mentorship versus sponsorship and how that is how one is different from the other, but how they're both equally important. And we've also brought in leaders in technology, women leaders in technology, to share their stories on how for other individuals to help with modeling and things that work for them and pitfalls that others can avoid. So we've done quite a bit, and we're really proud of the events that we've developed and the future that we have.
I love that. I think you made a really important strategic point there, that some of your stories go out. They're pushing the stories out. You're pushing out stories about women and the contributions they make. And stories are something we all remember. And then the second thing, looking inward, how can we support our existing people? How can we make those challenges that they're facing easy to deal with? If you haven't read the New York Times today, there's an article about Ms. Magazine, and Gloria Steinem is talking about how women during COVID ended up back to cooking, cleaning, running schools, going to work. I mean, is it a step forward? She said, obviously we've made many, many steps forward, but
Yes.
the thing is, it kind of cycles back again and again. Just when you think you've made 5 steps forward, 2 can go, you can step back 2. And I think something like your group, these activities help people feel like the momentum is going forward, not backwards. That's really super important.
And that's the hope. Yeah.
So I'm going to let you go have at it, Annelie and Allison. You can each share this question. How does your initiative coincide with broader efforts in organizations to improve diversity, equity, and inclusion? Another hot topic that really came to the forefront during COVID.
I'll go first, Allison, if you don't mind. I have a couple of thoughts on that. I mean, there's some obvious things, one of which is just fortuitous timing. And Yvonne, in her initial answer about the origin story for this, mentioned the Me Too movement. So the seed idea coincided with that movement. And, really our timing was either impeccable or lucky, depending on how you want to spin it, or both, right? But by definition, our focus is on creating more diversity in technology with the inclusion of women. That's what we're here to do. And this is happening alongside that movement across organizations. So it really is wonderful timing. The second way in which it coincides is it's that, we see ourselves as a slice of a pie, right? So depending on what kind of pie you're looking at, there's one type that's sort of the sector pie, and we're taking up the concerns of DEI or inclusion and diversity in the technical sector, right? Much of what we do would probably translate to many other sectors, but our focus is there. And there's some particularities in the UC system and more broadly in the tech sector for women. Then the other is on behalf of women and female identifying people. And so that's another slice, a different pie, gender-based or gender identity-based. And we can't and don't want to do it all, but we see that we're an important slice of the pie. So we're helping take steps and make progress in those particular areas in the larger movement. And by doing so, contributing to the larger movement. And then the third thing I would say is we're actualizing the vision for diversity, equity, and inclusion in many ways. And that's our goal, right? Our efforts are to concretize and actualize what the vision for diversity, equity, and inclusion is ultimately to become. And in some ways, along as we go, helping to evolve that vision, right? And we're leveraging the space and the support that these broader efforts are creating for us to do this, right? So we're not getting a lot of pushback. We're getting a lot of, yeah, bring it on, bring more, So those are 3 of the things I would share.
And Allison?
Yeah, and the other thing I would say is that we have a lot of support from our campus leadership on DEI initiatives, but you can't necessarily do DEI from the top down. It cannot be a mandate for change, and people will just do it. There has to also be a grassroots level of championing, and you have to have a lot of points and perspectives, and you have to start drawing those into the room, and that eventually also really can affect change. And so trying to get our particular perspective coincide with other groups out there and work together across our different, as Annelie said, slices of the pie, to work together to help bring our perspectives and our priorities to the table as well, so that our voices are all lifted. And as they say, the tide lifts all boats. That is part of the hope for this. Yeah.
Yeah, and you were very kind and judicious in the way you said it, Annelie, but from my experience, having been in tech for a long, long time, the numbers were like 30% women, 70% men, and not even any discussion of diversity amongst that tiny slice of the 30%. And then there's another perspective of where the leaders in technology were all men, in my experience, up until recently. And by recently, I mean the last 5 to 7 years out of a 30-year career. So there was even the roles, which I think is super important to address on campuses. Yeah, you could have 50% women, but if none of them are in leadership roles, there's something not sustainable about that model. So I think this is a really complex issue and something that technology is struggling with. I know even at LinkedIn, we are looking at mentorship roles. Every leader in our technology group also has to mentor a woman so that women engineers get a chance to come forward. We're looking at the way our hiring practice is done. We're trying to go blind. We're looking at not just doing Ivy League universities, state universities, public universities, skills-based. I mean, there's so many. I'm stopping here a little bit because I really want to emphasize this is not a simple topic. And it takes looking at it from so many different ways, including things like what you're doing, which is an employee resource group. And you have to be very persistent. So I just want to put you a little spot. Have you seen an uptick? Have you seen results from the bringing this DIE initiative forward in technology, in hiring practices? And
well, I did want to say, did want to share to that point, Lori. I have to give kudos to the system, the UC system, the campuses. We have a number of women CIOs leading IT on our campuses.
You do.
Recent, newly hired ones, in fact. So that right there is a great model and a great inspiration, right? On the ground, I would say awareness for sure. I don't know, Allison and Yvonne, what you would add to that, but for sure we're creating greater awareness, and I would say also a culture of like, let's talk about this. Let's put this out in the open, right? Let's not avoid talking about it.
And I will say that if anybody here has been on hiring committees over the years, I have noticed that the shift in the questions that we are asking for candidates. DEI is now something we always ask about. What candidates, like, how are you involved in diversity, equity, inclusion? What sort of activities can you communicate to us that you have done to help improve DEI in your current or past positions? It's very important to us. It's a big priority, particularly a priority at UC San Diego Library, where we're hiring. It is critical for our new hires to make sure that they understand that they contribute and that they are going to help us improve and increase awareness around these issues.
It's so important, Allison, you're right. I was working with a neuroscientist who actually is working down at Scripps at UCSD, and I was asking him about this DIE issue, the fact that we've all been, if you work in a university or you work in a corporation, you've probably had DIE training in the past 24 months. And if you have, I've been at 8. I've been at 8 workshops. I said, what's the effectiveness of it? And he says, Lori, I wish I could tell you it's very, very effective. It brings the awareness, but it doesn't necessarily change behaviors. In our studies, and they've been doing studies, it changes behaviors in about 10%, which is why this issue is really important that we keep pressure on it. And I was a little aghast that was the results. Only 10% of the people who took these trainings were actually changing behavior. So I put that out there for all of you to just, we're making progress, but you've got to really stay on this. So Yvonne, your article proposes a shareable and replicable model, which got me in instantly, for women in IT across the country in higher education. Anytime I don't have to reinvent something and there's a successful way to use it, I'm very happy about it. So share with us about the model, why it has been successful and where you see its real impact.
Yeah, I guess from my perspective, model is a formal term for something that's really just a simple concept, and
or framework, like the jungle gym that you can add things to the outside and the inside.
Yeah, but I think, I think for us, the basis of the foundation is the notion that really anyone among us can create change by joining forces with others. And you don't have to ask necessarily for permission, and you don't have to, wait for it, or be given or be assigned it. I think that we all have a power within ourselves to make change, but we do it by joining forces with others. So I feel like that's really the framework that we operate under. And the impact of doing that, you ask, what is the impact? Why does that matter? And I think it's because just back to what you said about, how do you affect change? Well, you kind of have to start by affecting change within yourself, right? And within the group of people that you are with. And so by joining forces with others and intentionally setting out to do something, you are exposing yourself and your group to that diversity of ideas and perspectives that you might not otherwise get. So in our example, by creating and participating in this larger university-wide group, that means that any one of our local campus groups are now getting greater input and ideas into what they can do. They're getting different exposure to different realities, ways of seeing the world. What I've observed is that by having this larger community, we now have access to more skill sets to work with on our joint initiatives. For example, Allison mentioned that community collective that we did. Well, it was just a little idea. We formed a little subcommittee and started talking about how to make it actually work. And it was so interesting to me to see every single person on the subcommittee had a different skill set that they could bring, that I can tell you just me and my own coworkers didn't necessarily have if we were trying to do this on our own. So we had access to more skill sets by being in this larger community, this joined forces community. And the other interesting thing to me is that you then have access to more leaders who you might get to talk to, go in front of, not just those that you work with, but people around the system. And suddenly you can maybe have an impact on them because you've joined forces. So I think those are the really most important impacts from an institutional standpoint, but also, there's also the impact of just having that sheer joy of networking with a broader group of women. And that's real. And in some ways that's what keeps you going, because it does bring you joy.
I think those are really important things. Particularly, you named two things that I was struck by: giving permission to women to act. You don't have to ask, you can have that. That's something you can own as your own power. And the second thing is that collectively we have a certain kind of power and reach that we wouldn't have singularly. Yeah. And it can be something more innovative, more creative than anything we could have imagined individually. So important that we understand that. It may be a little messy getting there, but I mean, that's but when you have 6 cooks in the kitchen, that's what happens. But I think it's really important to say that. And that's a really different model than what the universities had, maybe, thinking of the 80s and 90s, kind of a top-down hierarchy. This one is putting power across the university and saying all ideas matter, and ideas should be included as we're deciding what are the important things to address. So Allison and Annelie, share some recommended steps on what's worked in the past for this UC Women in Tech group and the steps others can take to build communities of their own. I'm going to share my screen for just a second because I think it helps to see some of these in text.
Sure. So the first one there, kindle your passion. When we think about this, I think all of us have a particular items that we're passionate about. For the women on this call, it's women in tech, but it could be a multitude of other items, and it's finding what it is that you really care about, and what it is that that's going to help that you're going to be able to sustain that energy. And then to build up the existing communities, you have to think like, okay, so you've kindled your passion, you have a little flame, but if you start to pull that like that single candle with a bunch of other candles and you have 30 candles all together lit, it's quite a blaze. Like you can really it's very visible, like you can, and by engaging with your existing, or by building up those existing communities, finding people who have that same passion with you, you can start somewhere. And it doesn't have to be starting huge, but it can be just for women in tech at UC San Diego. It started with meeting once a month for tea, like we met once a month for tea and we just talked about things, and it became the technical tea, and then it kind of blossomed out from there. It started with just an idea of wanting to get together and build a little bit of community. And as you build community, you can start to formalize your community. And then we talk about going for the power of scale. We had our UC San Diego little group, we had groups at UCLA, and by bringing our groups together under the umbrella of the UC, we're able to start affecting a much wider area of change. We're able to really connect thousands and thousands of women across the UC system. And when you think about the amount of women who are in tech, who work at the different University of California university system, it is an incredible amount of talent. And to be able to bring all those women together in particular initiatives is extremely powerful. And so you have a lot of scale on that. And then Annelie, how about you take the rest of these?
Yeah, sure. And on that scale point, I just wanted to add, I'm recalling now that I believe UC San Francisco, which is one of our campuses, and also UC Irvine have, since our committee has formed and the flame has been lit, have gone to on their campuses and built some really impactful communities at the campus level out of this community. So kind of drawing strength from seeing that this is possible and going and making something happen on their campuses. So that's another way that scale happens. On getting general leadership buy-in. So emphasis on general and buy-in. So obviously you want leaders with you. We've mentioned many times that we have not waited for permission. This is a grassroots thing, and we see needs, and we're tackling them and addressing them in ways that we can do so. But we've done it because we have a passion for it, and we know that it's important to do. And how we do it is we want to know that the leaders are supportive of it. So we've done things that make it very easy for the leaders to buy into what we're doing, right? We talk a lot about evidence-based learning these days in pedagogy, showing evidence of the need, right? And we have a lot of research experts across the UC system whose data and evidence we can draw from and help to back, why we're tackling some of these issues. So that's one strategy. Another one is leveraging people's diverse contexts and experiences. So Allison has already mentioned this, some good examples of this, leveraging the skill set of our community, which is very deep and diverse, not surprisingly, in any large community with multiplicity of roles and abilities and people's backgrounds. I mean, even on our own committee, right? Never mind across the system. So there's almost certainly going to be someone with the skill set to get something off the ground. So whether it's someone with strong project management skills, communication skills. So it's not necessarily always tech skills that you need, but also these tech adjacent or supporting skills, right? And in the example of the planning of the first community collective, the brainstorming session, as Allison mentioned, was so rich with how to create interactivity, like ways to create interactivity. And not everybody knew about all these things. And they settled on something called the Jamboard, which a lot of people have never used before. And we've since been using quite a bit because we find it to be very effective for this kind of interactive work. So, find out what people are doing, what people can bring to the table. And if they're passionate about contributing, they're, provide a space for them to plug in and share those skills. And then the third thing is really producing deliverables. So get stuff done. We talk about action, right? So we have regular conference events at the UC Tech conference. We have the next one coming up in August at San Diego this year. And we get to have in-person component to it finally. So that's great. So we're having a regular presence there. And I wouldn't say that we're guaranteed a conference slot, but I think, you know, more or less it's a sure bet. Community programming, right? So we're doing regular series of community programming, putting things out there for the wider audience, and contributing to things like today's event as well. And articles such as our EDUCAUSE article, and our current chair recently did an interview in the EdTech magazine as well. So you can check that out. And more recently, we've drafted a letter to our leadership around some of the staffing challenges that we're facing, and with some suggestions on ways to help make incremental improvements that could really make a difference for the staff in particular. So those are some examples.
Well, I think they're great examples, and I love the fact that it's get stuff done and have fun and joy. That is a really impressive part of what you all are doing. So Yvonne and Annelie, what needs or concerns are you hearing from your community? And what are some of the challenges you see going forward? Because we've touched on a few already, but I'm sure there's others that you could be very specific about.
Yeah, I can start off, Annelie, if that's okay. You know, honestly, the big concern is the massive change that COVID has wrought on our work life, right? So whether you're working from home now, or you're having to come into work part-time or full-time, you know, it's just massive change, because very little is the same as it used to be. And so there's no single perfect scenario that's going to meet everybody's needs. And we're all continuing to make adjustments to this new world of work. And I think Allison alluded to this earlier, that it's really impacting women, because they are often still the primary caregivers, whether it's for children or elderly parents. And so this spring we're, you know, having our meetings, and we often have a period of time where we just do some open dialogue and how are people doing kind of thing. And people our committee members were expressing just a lot of concern, a lot of, honestly, stress. And so that's, to what Annelie mentioned earlier, that's what caused us to think, let's write an open letter to leadership to try to express these concerns, that it's not just one or two people around their campus, it's a lot of people across the whole UC system. But to be proactive and positive and suggest avenues for what could be done to address some of these concerns. Not that we or anyone has the exact answer, right? Because the change is ongoing and we're all still trying to figure it out, including our leaders. So we did, as Annelie mentioned, we did write this letter. This was very recent. And it's not a list of demands, you know, it's not intended to come across in that way at all. It's really a statement of concern, and then a list of suggestions that leaders could think about, be aware of, and hopefully implement some of them, certainly not all, but those that make sense, or at least to get started, again, with using that concept of just get started somewhere and then you're going. So as an example, I can give you a few examples of what we talk about in the letter. Is first, just to express that burnout is real. That's been a big concern expressed by our community. And so we're saying that burnout is real. People have had huge workloads, the 8-hour back-to-back Zoom meetings. So our suggestion to our leadership is become aware of that, you know, acknowledge it, and start taking some steps to address workload and to protect people's need for personal time. Flexibility in schedules is huge. It's a real concern for people. They need it. They work better when they have it. So that's another suggestion that we have. You know, and I think, as I said, the change is ongoing. We're going to continue be in a period of massive change, I think, for quite some time. And so our organizations are all having to cultivate a new workplace culture, and nobody knows exactly what's going to be, and we're all experimenting. So again, I think it's important for leaders to acknowledge that and to make sure that they're engaging women at all levels, all staff levels, to help develop and conceptualize what that workplace culture would be. we need to make sure that we're including women's perspectives. So I think those are the main concerns and how we're trying to address them in our committee. So Annelie, what do you want to add to that?
Yeah, and also that all those concerns that Yvonne mentioned that we've raised in our letter and made suggestions about, they don't impact people the same way, right? I mean, it's obvious when you stop and say it, and yet it gets overlooked so often. Like we want to tend to lump the staff all together as this uniform body, and it's just not. The impacts are as diverse, speaking of diversity, as there are people almost, right? And you can't possibly create policy or practice for each individual person, but building in that flexibility where you can, and just being aware and being open to hearing an individual story and an individual impact, and creating space for that is important. Speaking of UC being a large institution, I mean, we're 10 campuses spread across a giant state, right? Our membership is roughly 40 on the committee. It's constantly evolving. We have new people coming on, and other people going off. And so we have created a charter, and we have some foundational structure to the committee, just so that we can plug people in, that kind of framework that you mentioned, Lori, earlier. But I think there's a sense among us that have been there since the beginning, how do we balance the structure and that is needed for a group of this size and to have impact across such a scale, statewide and multi-campus? How do we operate and maintain and build upon that structure where needed, while also keeping that startup spirit that really got us going in the first place, and brings that joy that we have with this? And we're sometimes confronted with that in our meetings. Like, we don't want to overstructure the meetings. We don't want to leave it too loosey-goosey. We want to get things done. How do you balance that? Like, this is not anything new, but that is definitely something that we're trying to struggle and work with in the committee itself. And then generally, both in the committee and I think more broadly, what we're hearing is people are burned out, right? And we're going through still a pandemic. How do you keep up momentum in whatever you're doing? For us, it's this committee and the concerns that we want to address. How do you plug in your energy and keep yourself motivated while also holding down busy jobs, right? And holding down busy lives that are unpredictable and changeable constantly. So I think there's an unpredictability that, comes along with all of the change that Yvonne has mentioned, and which we're trying to address and work with leadership on. And then just how do we manage the work that we're doing in a way that balances the needs and the joys of that work.
I think you make great points there, that we have thought of universities being kind of rigid structures, and now we need to think of them as flexible structures. It's almost like being in a yoga class when my teacher said, balance on one foot. And the teacher said, what did you learn, Lori? I said, I'm anything but still. I'm making constant set of adjustments to be able to stand on one foot. And that's kind of key to understand flexibility and fluidity, is we make constant adjustments. And I think Annelie and Yvonne and Allison, that's what's going to keep your program fresh. Another thing we have, and just want to reinforce, the data that we see right now in our LinkedIn Learning is that our top 3 to 5 courses right now is on burnout, perseverance, work-life balance, and how to control the hybrid high flex models that we see in the work-life balance. It's changing now from all being at home to all being at work, and some weird mixture in between, and how to reconnect with all those people. And these are very real. I also have to attend, as part of my job, many presidents and chancellors survey type situations with different data things. And I'll tell you, the good news is well-being has moved in the top 5 for chancellors and presidents. So it's not something that they're not aware of. And that, to me, Annelie and Yvonne, is a sign of progress, that when there's awareness, then you can start addressing something. If it's not even on the board, it's pretty hard to get it up there into leadership. But once you see that that's something that matters, then it makes a difference. And again, it goes back to this ability to hire and recruit. You know, the UC campuses and the state university systems represent the highest research institutions in the world. And to make them be great, innovative, creative places, we want to attract the best kind of people that we can cost. It's not just the students we attract, it's the people that work within these institutions. This is such a big deal. They are living, breathing organisms that support innovation, creativity, and the future. And it's really important that we think about them that way. So we're getting to the end. What keeps you, all of you, I'm going to put this out to all of you, what keeps you so engaged in the work of UCWIT? I can see you're all pretty passionate, engaged women, but do you have any particular things that keeps you in the game?
Yeah, I would say that it keeps me in the game when I think about when I was very early in my career. I worked in research and I worked in kind of a small shop, and I was very much alone. And I did not necessarily have support, and I didn't necessarily have people who were rooting for me as well within my organization. And so it was very difficult sometimes because when you're young and early in your career, you don't always know, am I doing the right thing? Like, this doesn't feel right. Should I say something? Like, maybe this is just how it is, and it can be, I would have loved to have had a support network for particular issues that that occurred to talk about and find out about, like, what can I do here? Like, how can I make this better? Like, and so thinking about people, particular people who are young in their career, is very important for me, and a big part of why I want to keep working towards women in tech.
A really important point there, that women don't feel like that puts their job in jeopardy by having these conversations.
Yeah, a safe space.
Annelie, Yvonne?
I think for me, I love to build community. So for me, it's an opportunity to continue to contribute to a worthwhile community. I believe this is worthwhile, and that's all I need, is to believe that. And I'm seeing it in the community that we have, and those who want to participate in it. So, and it's outside of my own campus, so it allows me to kind of broaden my horizons, broaden my exposure, expand my network. I love to meet new people and learn about what they do and how they do things, and be able to reach out to them and ask, what do you think about this and that? So sharing my abilities widely to build community and being able to do that, I see that as the value that I bring, and that's what gets me jazzed to do this. And then the other thing is just that exposure to others with such amazing talent. So, not too long ago when I was chair, and with the vice chair that was working with me, we met with one of our members who is at the UC San Francisco campus, who was doing an MBA, an executive MBA at UCLA's management school. And she reached out to us and said, could I meet with you? I'd like to learn how you got, how do you find leading a community like this? She was very interested in sort of organizational development and culture and things like that in her studies. And so we got to know her. We met with her a couple of times in person. This was pre-COVID, and just got to really know each other and expand our understanding of what each other is doing on our campuses. So I love that.
I do too. It's great. Yvonne, anything for you?
Oh, yes. Kind of building on what both Annelie and Allison have said, it's just so enriching to be involved in something that's bigger than yourself or your own job. So I get tremendous personal satisfaction out of that, personal enrichment, I think. But I also believe that we have created, and by we, I mean every single member of our system-wide committee, together, we've created this incredible resource for our community. And that's our larger goal, because by having this group, we all get opportunities for leadership skills development. We get to do career networking, and we find mentors in our community, in our committee. We get emotional support. And so to Annelie's, she used the word, it's worthwhile. Yes, it is such a worthwhile effort because of that resource that we are building together. So, even when you're busy and you just feel like, oh, I've got to do this committee work around my regular work, it's knowing that we should keep our eye on that larger goal, because that's the prize we're after.
Well, just to reinforce what you're saying, we've done a survey of the Gen Z, and when we ask them what's the number one thing they care about in getting a new job, it isn't what baby boomers want, which is salary. It's purpose, feeling a sense of purpose and meaning at their jobs and what the benefits of that job are for inward mobility. So just letting you know, that's the new crop of people coming in. And I think you guys really embody that spirit. What I like about UCWIT community is that you took a grassroots level approach that has proved to have both scale and speed. You as women with your passion for this work are all so inspiring. Tell us, if we as an individual could do any one thing today, in the next week or the next month, what actions would you suggest? And then we'll go to Q&A.
I'm going to jump in and start. And this is not very, this is sounds so simple, and yet it's sometimes so hard. Set aside an hour on your calendar to find a way to think about what matters to you. Because that's how we all started with this. I mean, the idea came from people setting aside time for professional development, Yvonne and others that she was with in that leadership training. Plug into an opportunity like that if you can, or if you can't, all you need to do is set aside an hour in your calendar and read about something that matters to you, listen to something that matters to you, or just think about it, or have a conversation with someone, have coffee or tea with someone and talk about, what am I doing? What matters to me? What do I want to be involved in? And is there something that you'd like to take action on for yourself or for others? And is there a way to get involved in that realm? It doesn't take much, but having done that, do it for yourself. And then you may have an awareness that you can build on, or do it again if you don't. Reach out to someone and cultivate a conversation around that topic. And you will find we all have things that matter to us and want to take action on. Got to create that initial step.
You're so right on this one, Annelie. It can be as simple as just asking someone to go on a 45-minute walk with you and having that conversation. Yvonne and Allison, an action you'd suggest?
Yeah, I'll reiterate something that I feel like I've said it a couple of times, but
you have to say it 3 times to learn anything.
I have to say it 3 times to remember that I've said it. I just so profoundly believe that we can't do anything alone. So you do need to join forces, but I feel like you don't have to even know what you're passionate about, because I think sometimes when people, you hear this, find your passion, pursue your passion. Sometimes being told that is scary. You sit there and you think, oh, I don't really know what am I passionate about? So I think building on what Annelie said, I would suggest that you reach out to a couple of friends at work and just form a monthly meetup. You're just going to say, we're going to get together, and who knows what you talk about. You might talk about your pets, you might talk about work, but just do that and take it from there. And you might decide as you have these conversations that, well, you know what, there's something that we want to change. And you are going to propose this one small thing. And it could be super small. You could ask your boss to establish that meetings should start 10 minutes after the hour so that everyone gets a little mini break. Just start small. But I think you start building that muscle memory, so to speak, of how to do things. And over time, you find that those little proposals, those little changes you affect build up. And then you look back and you think, wow, we're actually doing something. So that's what I would suggest.
I think that's really important, Yvonne, especially right now as we're starting to reconnect. We call it the great reconnection here at LinkedIn. We've kind of gotten in the habit of being home alone in our own little bubble. And we need to brush up on our etiquette and how to connect and in meaningful ways and have conversations again and, meet at the drinking fountain. And as you pointed out, it doesn't have to be for hours. It could be 15 minutes, 20 minutes. Allison, you're going to be leading the new charge. What action would you like women in tech to be out there taking?
I would say that the big thing for me is that we've talked a lot about like starting small, building groups, and that just to remember that community doesn't just happen. You have to work at it a little bit. And but work is in air quotes, like it can be things as simple as Yvonne said, as getting together, but being for something casual, but just being open to the idea of like, we're just us meeting is for lunch is also building community, and to be intentional with reaching out to individuals to invite them in. I've seen a lot of times where you say like a blanket call for join my group and you get crickets. But if you send targeted invitations to individuals that you think would be impactful, or even just really benefit from being part of a community, those are surprisingly well received. I've received those once or twice myself, where someone says, hey, I don't know if you're considering this, but I think you'd be great in this group and we would love to have you. And I say, well, I haven't really thought about it, but I think I will now, so
I think that's just completely evil genius, because you're
Yeah.
making people feel like they're getting the special
well, 'cause
invite.
you're asking,
You selected me. You're not just, it's not just mass social media
yeah,
blitzing me. I
please
love
be
that
part of,
idea.
like, we want you to be part of this community. Please consider us. It goes a long way. And it's a little bit more, it's not the super light touch of a spam email, but I will say that when you're starting to build community, that's a great way to do it when you're trying to build momentum.
So Anna, if you have any questions from our attendees today, it'd be great to have them. And I'm sharing the screen to promote the article that they wrote for EDUCAUSE, which really gives you the ground rules and all the step-by-step info you need to do something like this on your own campus.
Thanks, Lori. So far, I'm not seeing any open questions.
So we're getting close to the end anyway. Is there any last things, Allison, Annelie, and Yvonne, that you'd like to leave us with? I, of course, will let you know, because I work at LinkedIn Learning. There are lots and lots. We have really built up the library in the past 2 years, during the past 24 months, on how to help in exactly this issue. We don't see it just as being a higher ed issue. We see it as a corporate issue. We see it as an issue that's personal to women in all jobs and all walks of life. And just to let you know that we have a lot of small, interesting courses out there that'll help you and that can give you confidence and start those weekly chats and those tea parties and those walks, and help you if you don't have the whole structure of the UC system. Another suggestion I might make too is if you're in small states, I've noticed it in the Midwest that often Ohio, Indiana, and Iowa and Illinois get together to do collaboration. It doesn't have to be in your state. You could work with a consortium or a network of like-minded universities who share the same sort of characteristics or same sort of culture. So don't let this stop you just because you don't have a UC system. I would tell you there's all ways to, we've heard today, there's so many different ways to build community. So last thoughts before we check out today?
I have one last thought, just a note that we do have a website. And on our website, we've posted, this article, of course, but we've also, for example, posted our open letter to leadership. We've got recordings of most of our events, or at least descriptions of them. So if people are interested in any of these, it's easy to find that information. Oh, thank you, Allison. As I think Annelie mentioned, that our current chair had a really great interview in EdTech magazine, and that's posted on our website as well. So it's part of my saying this too, is just to emphasize the three of us are speaking here today, but this committee is so much more than the three of us.
Yeah.
Any three among our members could have been here today talking with you. And
Absolutely.
Such a wonderful, you guys are so inspiring. I'm like your new groupie. I'm really, really proud. I mean, if you're a member of EDUCAUSE, you get a lot of stuff from EDUCAUSE like 3-4 times a week. And this is one of the highlights that I've seen this last semester for me. Thanks again for joining us today. We'll be taking a break over the summer. I encourage you to look at all the recordings of the higher education leadership webinars. You can see them on highereducationleaders.splashthought.com. Thank you so much, Allison, Annelie, and Yvonne, for sharing your experiences and practices. And thank you to those who attended today. It's been an honor and a privilege. And that's a wrap.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take
Bye
care,
all.
everyone. Have a good summer.